Anyway, so I'm going to sort of come from where Gordon left off, and I'm going to be talking about the health aspects and what we are trying to do to start answering some of the questions about health. And this is something that ultimately you'll all be able to get involved with, as I will tell you. So you can all take part in Britain Breathing. So it's cross-faculty collaboration. We've got people, myself and Louise and Andy from my faculty, and then people from the engineering science faculty working in computer sciences and computer-human interactions. And we've been recruiting Dave and Gordon latterly, and hopefully we're getting some more people involved as well. And when you think about pollution, so I'm going to sort of come away from pollution to a slightly more general question, but I will just explain. With pollution, the data on health is largely epidemiological. So you see people go to hospital at the same time as you see a sort of peak in pollution symptoms. And they tend to think about cardiovascular effects. There's some evidence that it's affecting things like brain disorders, like Alzheimer's. And there's a lot of evidence around breathing difficulties. And this is where we came in, because we were interested in allergies. So allergies are an immune phenomenon. So it's where your immune system is reacting to things that you should be ignoring, and you're having an immune response. And asthma can be a type of allergy. So here is a normal bronchial. These are the airways in your lung. And this is it after it's been exposed, just a few minutes after it's been exposed to an allergen. In this case, it was dust mite allergen. And what you can see is it's about the same diameter, but it's got lots and lots of little spots around it. And that's an immune infiltration. And ultimately, the diameter of your bronchial will close. You'll make mucus, and it'll be very hard to breathe. Okay, so the common allergens that we see in the UK are things like pollen. I've got hay fever. Anybody else got hay fever in the room? There's a few hands up. Dust mite antigens I've alluded to. Pets are another common one. And they're really common. They are affecting about 1 in 4 of us. So asthma is associated with an allergic phenomenon. Okay? And we know that allergies are increasing at an exponential rate in the UK. It's quite frightening. So this is just hospital admissions from 2011 through to just half of 2016. Okay, you can see there's a really steep increase. So this is just either diagnosis or flare. Now, for those who've got asthma or allergy in the room, you know that most of the time you're self-managing your symptoms. You're not going to the doctors. You may even be able to get your meds from going to the supermarket. So there's a huge hole in the data about what is truly happening to people with allergies and asthma. When are they actually starting to flare? Because it's no good knowing when they're in hospital and they're really, really wheezing. We need to know before. So understanding why allergies are increasing and understanding better the picture of what's going on with allergies is a really major unmet clinical need. And it's one of the things that's flagged up by Asthma UK, and they've done a big Europe-wide survey, and this is one of the really, really important questions. And this just was to remind me that most people self-medicate, but I've already said that. There are other brands. So, why are allergies increasing? There's a lot of hypotheses out there. Here's my worm. Should I talk about my worm? That's my worm. Beautiful imaging done in materials science. So one idea that gained a lot of traction in about 1978, 1979 was by a chap called Don Strachan, and he said, oh, well, we've got so clean in the West, and because we've got clean, our immune system doesn't get trained up, and so that makes us more susceptible to allergies. Our immune system goes wonky. And he said that if you had a sort of rural environment, or you had lots and lots of brothers and sisters, then you would get exposure to lots of germs, and that would train your immune system up. It has, however, shifted this idea because we realise that one of the things that happens if you're in the sort of rural environment, for example, is that you're getting exposed to different environmental antigens, so different environmental exposures, bacteria, and they could be important for educating your immune system. And then there's also a correlation with parasite exposure, parasitic worms. I told you I'd get it in there. So in countries that have a really high exposure of worms, they have a much lower rate of allergies and also autoimmune diseases, which is another immunology kind of manifestation. And we used to have all these diseases in our country. We got rid of them really recently. So it was only about 100 years or so ago that we had parasitic worms resident in our country. Even our kings and queens had them. They didn't care if you were royal. They would still infect you. So King Richard III was absolutely ridden with parasitic roundworm. So this is a picture of the microbiology to show you that it all could be to do with the bacteria that were exposed to bacterial changes caused by parasites or parasites themselves. That's one idea, but that ignores exactly what Gordon's been talking about. The environment that we live in has changed drastically. We are farming crops that we never used to farm, and to levels just unsurpassed. And we have all these pollutants. I've just shown you that picture. And there's evidence that pollutants can change the structure of pollens and make them more exciting for our immune system, so they're more likely to switch our immune system on. So when you couple all these different factors in, what's going on? And this was I pulled these off the other week, off the internet. The Guardian's doing a special all week on pollution, if you want to read some really nice articles about pollution. It's incredibly topical. We're really, really worried at this point about pollution. So what can we do? What is the impact of all these things on health? And I'm talking about that whole time course of health, not just hospital admission, not just diagnosis. And this is usually the point where I kind of gauge the audience and I channel Matt Damon and say, we need to science the shit out of it. So what we decided to do was a big experiment. And we got two charities, learning societies involved, the British Society for Immunology and the Royal Society of Biology, which means we've got a panel of experts, clinicians, and academics that are feeding into this. And then this is us. This is the initial team for Britain Breathing. And you are the crucial ingredient for this massive experiment. And it was called Britain Breathing. And so we set this up last year, and it was a pilot last year to gather data from everyone to understand about the patterns of seasonal allergy symptoms, so asthma and hay fever, when and where they would occur. We could get that data and we could start to build a map of when and where things were occurring that we could then take to Gordon's data and start to look at the interactions. Now, when you're looking at apps, there's a huge fail rate. Lots of people will download an app and go, oh, this is too complicated, and delete it really, really quickly. And what we needed was a really good buy-in. So the app had to be useful to people, and that was absolutely crucial. So we involved people with allergies in designing the features of the app and designing the look of the app. So this is an approach that we stole from human-computer interfaces, where they actually... And here's Andy holding it up. They made little screens, little questions. They tested them on each other. Here's people in the workshops testing the screens. And from that series of workshops, we could define criteria that were really important to our users. So it had to be quick and easy to use. Really, really important. They did not want to go through loads and loads of screens and pages. Really wanted personal symptom tracking, so they could monitor and track their own disease. Ultimately, they wanted alerts about symptoms in their local area so they could make decisions about, do I want to go to the seaside today? Is it a really sneezy place? And they wanted to be able to see how other people were doing. Misery loves companions. So they really wanted to see how everybody else was getting on with their allergies. And I think it made people feel better because you felt like you were part of a community. And they were incredibly supportive about sharing the data for academic research. And interestingly, the top three criteria they outlined are the ones that have been outlined in the European-wide searches, and as outlined by Asthma UK. So we had questions too with the pilot. Was the data going to be any good? Was it going to mean anything? Were we going to get good coverage? So that when we launched a full application, it would be good. What would user retention be like? Would people use it once and then give up? So we'd just get a few peaks and then it would stop. And what did people like or not like about the app? What are the particular preferences? So here is our doodles. This is us, the design that was made by our applicants. This is what we drew, and that was what the screen looked like for the pilot. So doodles straight through to digital. And it's very simple. There's a welcome screen. Then you have a series of questions. How are you feeling? You click a button. In this case, we've clicked so-so. And in that case, you get a second screen. And you get to select how your allergies are affecting you today. That's it. That's all you do. So it takes about 5 clicks a day. And it takes about 10 seconds, I know, because I did it. And how did that feed into what we wanted to know? So as of September 2016, we closed at the end of September for the pilot run. We had about 18,386 observations. So we had about 20,000 observations at the end. So that's not bad for 6 months of data. Roughly split quite well between males and females. Slightly more females were using it. The ages, we're just taking this data from June. Again, we had a reasonably good spread of ages. We did ethics that said we weren't going to take under 18, so that's why we got very many of those. Interestingly, see, older people do like using apps. That was quite nice to see. Although we need to do something, I think, to target the 70+ bracket moving forward. Got loads of really good feedback. And it was really interesting to talk to people about how they were using it. People were using it in different ways. So one person was so happy because it was the first way that they could explain to their children why their wife was just so out of it for quite a big chunk of the summer when they were feeling so unwell with hay fever. And so it was the first time their children had really, really understood it, because they could see the symptoms, they could see the maps, they could see how it was changing, and they could do all the activities for the lung function. So there was things we needed to tweak, like the reminder, which was set for one type of phone. So there's some things that we decided to move, but generally very, very positive feedback. Mostly it was, when's it going to be available on iPhone? That was our biggest set of feedback. And we did some modeling to show the data. So this is just showing you all the data from a big chunk of time, from the 14th to the 29th of July, August. And what you can see is yellows are moderate symptoms, greens are no symptoms. And the reason I picked this particular map is no symptoms means they're logging data. That means people are logging data when they feel well, which really shows a good retention. And you can see here there's quite a good spread of areas. And people, you can go and explore that. People did go and explore the data. So, for example, this is just looking at nose symptoms over the same period. This is the average data over that period. You can see there's a little red peak here, which shows there was an area where there was very severe symptoms. And you can look at smaller time frames. So you'll see that it'll change over time. So what are we starting to learn from this? So in that time period, we could see that there were several big peaks of when people felt very, very unwell. And that really correlated with rhinitis, or stuffy nose. And the two major peaks we saw, there was one in April and there was one in June. And that actually correlates with known pollen peaks. So there's around 3 waves of hay fever. The first is around your birch pollens in spring. Then you get your grass pollens, which is my particular bugbear, in June. So tennis, Wimbledon equals hay fever season, unfortunately for me. And then you get a later one that correlates with the weeds. So we could see these 2 big peaks here. And we also got hold of prescription data for the time, and we could see that that correlated absolutely beautifully with the data. So that suggests that we do get really good quality data. Also, the fact that people are happy to report they feel well suggests we're getting really good retention, and we could see we were getting a good geographical coverage. So that kind of answered our questions about data, coverage, retention, and preferences. So what next? We are launching Britain Breathing 2, which is multi-platform. We will have the iPhone version. It will work on iPads. It will work on all phones. And that will be on March the 26th. It's free to use. It's free to download. And then we're going to be doing the data linkage with Gordon. We're also going to be looking at weather, because weather is quite important and that can affect pollution as well, and looking at the pollen types. And we're really looking at working a lot closer with Asthma UK to target particular patient groups and look at retention. So you can be a part of the project moving forward. Thank you very much for listening. And you can sneeze for science.
Thank you, Sina. Thank you both.